This episode is brought to you by Manscaped.com. Latvian beaches are a perfect place to go to before or after a wonderful game of Virslīga football, but are you ready to soak up those summer vibes and unveil your ultimate beach bud? Well, you're in luck, because our friends over at Manscaped.com have you covered from head to toe. With the Performance Package 5.0 Ultra, this ultimate all-in-one grooming kit is set to have you looking and feeling your best in the summer sun. Trust Manscaped and unlock the confidence you need to turn heads this season. Join the 10 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped.com for 20% off plus free shipping with code LFP20, and let's make this summer your smoothest one yet. Welcome to the Latvian Football Podcast. We're back with an exciting episode where we're going to cover a very, very special competition, oldest, still running and second oldest international competition in the world, which is, of course, the Baltic Cup, which occurs every 2 years and is played between Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia, plus lately a guest nation. This year it was the Faroe Islands. And so we are very excited, and I think it's amazing heritage, and we want to share that with you. If you don't know about the competition, or maybe you'd like to find out more, and to do that with us today is a special guest, Raimonds Kaže.
Hey, I'm a wannabe Latvian football historian. Have been doing this thing for something like 15 years in my spare time when I'm not a software engineer, but I'm mostly focusing on the pre-war times, so the ancient years of the Baltic Cup are in my main field of interest.
I think 15 years of experience makes you a historian. It's quite a good long period of time studying quite a specific cup.
I'm not just studying the Baltic Cup, of course, but everything concerning Latvian football at the time. And I would like to contradict the fact of the Baltic Cup being the oldest international tournament that's still running. No, that part is sort of true, but it is not the second oldest, because the oldest is considered the tournament between the home nations, and there was the Central European International Tournament, which was started 1 year before the Baltic Cup, and that was the reason why the Baltic Cup came into existence in the first place. Because there were talks about hosting this tournament in Central Europe, and the Baltic countries decided we need one of our own. But to make it a bit older than the other one, the Central European Tournament started in 1927, but the first edition finished in 1930. They were quite slow at it.
Three-year tournament.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
Meanwhile, the Baltic Cup started in 28 and it finished in 28 over a period of 3 days, because how much time do you need to play the Baltic Cup?
Well, not 3 years, clearly. And, I mean, your compatriots back in the Isles complain about having a long season, like 3 years, that's...
Yeah, I mean, and the Home of Nations as well, that's sort of been a stop-start thing as well, I guess.
Right, so what is the Baltic Cup? Why is it interesting? Why is it still going?
It is interesting mostly for the reason that in the 1920s and in the 1930s, for countries like Latvia, Lithuania and Estonia, traveling to play football to further countries was an expensive thing, and most of the games they played were still amongst the neighboring nations, in addition to the three countries also against Sweden, Finland and Poland. But most of the games were still played amongst each other, and at some point we realized that we need some official way to determine who is the best, because if we're just playing friendlies, it doesn't count. And then I started a tournament.
So the aim was to make football in the Baltics more competitive and to improve it ultimately.
Because at that time, for national teams, there was basically no competitive games at all, because the World Cup was started in 1930.
Yeah. But these days we think of the Baltic nations as these close friends and siblings, but that doesn't seem to have been the case back then, was it?
Oh, no. Basically, every football tournament in Latvia at that time involved some scandals, even local ones.
And they got the referee drunk once.
They had all possible sorts of problems, and also at that time, unlike nowadays where you can at least get some more or less neutral information from the media, the media was biased just like the fans. And you could read an article about your team losing 0-7 and claiming that it was all fault of the referee who made 2 mistakes during the match and therefore destroyed the game for you.
So was that a bit of an early era of fake news?
Sort of, because
maybe yellow press.
It was not yellow press. It was just that every newspaper was friendly with some of the football clubs and very not friendly to the other ones. So you were naturally biased. And when it was Latvia against Lithuania or Estonia, then you were just biased for your own country. And nobody knows for sure, for most of the refereeing scandals, if there was any truth to the allegations at all. But already in the first tournament that Latvia won, Estonians were complaining that the referee was completely for Latvia. And then a couple of years later, Latvia made a serious mistake of trying to change the rules of a competition. Because in one of the 2 years in a row, Latvia had lost the first place on goal difference, and then they realized, no, we cannot let goal difference in. If there is a draw, then you need to replay the game. And then in 1933, Latvia won against either Lithuania or Estonia, it doesn't matter, all 2 other games were drawn. Latvia claimed we have won the tournament, and the neighbors said, no, you have not, you changed the rules yourselves.
Why didn't they decide to bring in some kind of like neutral observer to kind of set the rules and ensure there was a bit more order?
How was it governed?
It was governed by the 3 federations, and not only in sports without involvement of neutral observers, there were some issues, because when the countries just gained their independence, the border dispute between the 3 countries was only settled through international involvement. But for football, there was probably no one to involve, unless you ask just some, random representative of a Swedish football federation to come over and you will be the wise guy for us and make a decision. But they didn't involve anyone. So after, in that tournament, when there were too many drawn games, they had to either replay the game or play until later in the evening, but it got dark. And Latvians decided that they had won the tournament and went back home. And afterwards, there was no football relationship between Latvia and Estonia for 2 years.
Oh, it sounds like a bit of a sibling sort of rivalry.
Exactly. And the next time it was even stranger.
So there was a pause for 2 years.
Yeah.
What year was this?
There was no tournament in 1934, and the 1933 tournament was considered to have been void.
Okay, right.
Then for a couple of years they played again, and in 1939 there was no tournament again, because at the Basketball European Championships there was a mixed understanding of how the final game between Latvia and Lithuania ended, and then Latvia and Lithuania stopped doing sports together.
So it sounds like there's been a lot of drama to this cup,
yes,
especially early on. Has anything happened in the later years with this drama? Has there been similar things since
we regained independence?
Yeah.
I doubt that there has been anything similar to that. There have been some tournaments with strange participants of the Baltic Cup, like the Faroe Islands this year, which are not very in the Baltics, but everyone seems to more or less agree.
They've got a scandal.
It's close enough.
Yeah.
But then, all right, that's super interesting. And would you say then the football was so central back in those days to the people in the societies that these Baltic Cup controversies sort of mirrored the relationships between the states?
Yes, for sure. Because at that time, football was by far the most popular sport in the whole of the Baltics. And
what kind of attendances were attending games?
Did they count?
Of course, they sort of kept count, and every newspaper gave a different number. But for local league games, attendances of 3,000 to 5,000 people were quite regular. For international, I don't really know. But that thing also changed as the stadiums got somewhat less bad.
Yeah. So in the mid-30s, all three Baltic states sort of descended into various forms of totalitarian regimes. Has that affected the way the Baltic Cup was used or perceived or played in any way?
No, I don't believe it was. Because at least in Latvia, the state leader was not that enthusiastic about sports, and I don't think that was the case in other countries.
So there's no history of political movements around football or anything like that, or using it as a propaganda tool or anything?
For national team, no.
Interesting. But for clubs then?
For clubs were incidents of anti-Semitic behavior in the early 1930s, but and the relationship between Latvians and Germans was sort of present there, but on the national level now.
Do you know what was the composition of the national team at the time? Like, how Latvian was it?
It was mostly Latvian, but it is very difficult to describe that compared to the conceptions in how people treat that. For example, the Baltic Germans were a very separate group and the Jews were a separate group, but in fact the mixing between the different ethnicities was much higher than it is it is common to consider, and there are footballers who were of Russian origin, and they were considered to be absolute Latvians. There were people who had a Latvian first and last name, and they emigrated as Germans, and there were people who were officially Germans, and they did not emigrate as Germans.
So you'd say it was a fairly good representation of society at the time?
Yeah, I did count according to there were something like 115 footballers who played for the national team in total. Among them, there was something like 5 or 6 Jews, 10 to 15 Germans, around 5 Russians, and a couple of Lithuanians and Estonians.
And were they all playing in Latvia for Latvian clubs at the time, or were any of them playing elsewhere?
Almost everyone was playing locally. There were a couple of footballers who played for not very long periods in Austria, representing Austria, Vienna, and Hakoah Vienna. The latter one for Jewish footballers, and the most successful Latvian footballer at the time internationally was Ilja Westerman, a Jewish guy who played for Football Club de Paris, which was a rather good French side at the time.
All right. I was very surprised with the animosity between the three Baltic states at the time and how it reflected in the football fields. But we know what happened in 1940s, but the Baltic Cup seems to have continued throughout.
That is a difficult question to answer, whether that continued or not. Also, I just checked that on the English version of Wikipedia. The Baltic Cup did not take place between 1940 and 1992. On the Latvian one, it did, but
I thought I checked the English version as well.
No, there was a club. There was a club competition or inter-Baltic.
There was a tournament between the Baltic Soviet republics, and in the first years after the war, it sort of resembled the original Baltic Cup, although they did not use the name Baltic Cup initially, but it was part of the Baltic Spartakiada, which was a thing in the Soviet world.
Why didn't they use the cup? The original cup was only reasoning.
For one, the trophy was lost.
And the trophy was lost.
But they also tried never to use the terminology of the bourgeois state that they considered to have been a fascist dictatorship. And
Do you know what happened to the trophy? Do you know where it is?
No. I remember reading something about it, but I have no idea what it was.
It's a gorgeous trophy.
Yeah.
The current one, the replica, kind of gives a hint at what it looked like. It was reconstructed from photographs, but it's stunning.
The England World Cup that they won in 1966 got lost and was found by a dog, I believe, called Pickles. There doesn't seem to be a dog in Latvia to find the trophy yet.
No, it's probably not in Latvia.
Most likely not. And with the sort of Baltic Cup, the first years it was at least played by the sort of representatives of those countries. Although at the same time, I believe every team contained at least one or two Soviet soldiers, which doesn't make it really...
Just to be safe.
Yeah, it doesn't make it a very national team of the territory, but whatever. And since 1950, the representatives of the teams playing in the Soviet League did not play there, only from the local tournament, which made it of an even lower value, because it's just like a more or less amateur tournament. And then it stopped for a while, then it resumed, then it stopped again.
In terms of the locations, where were the typical locations? Were they always in Vilnius, Riga, Tallinn, or did they typically spread them out?
I believe it was held in Liepaja at least a couple of times, but in the Soviet times I have no idea. Also, the info on that is very limited. For some years you can't even find the squads for the teams.
But why do you think it was allowed to go on, whether it was Baltic Cup or not?
Because it was not really allowed to go on. It's just that in the Soviet times they had all sorts of competitions between everyone. And when you have this thing like the Spartakiad between these three semi-countries, which are located next one to another, among other things, they had a football tournament. It was not a separate event like it is now.
So that's why you say Baltic Cup didn't actually continue.
Yeah, exactly.
And Wikipedia says that it sort of did. They just counted the friendlies.
Yeah. No, they were...
was there a trophy?
It was not, there was some kind of... The winner was determined. If there was a trophy, I don't know.
It's probably a badge. Soviets like their badges.
But as it was not a football tournament per se, but just one thing in a bigger competition, then it is not the same thing.
All right. Well, the official record has Latvia holding the lead in the Baltic Cup with 13 wins, and Lithuania with 10, and Estonia with 5. If we take this time period away during the occupation years, where does that put us?
The numbers that you just said don't include the occupation years.
Well, there you go then.
Because otherwise the numbers would be higher.
That's true. If then...
the other version has Latvia with something like 30 victories in the tournament.
So we're good either way.
Yeah.
Okay.
For now.
For now. Not after last tournament. You never know.
Well, Estonia won 2 of the last 3, and the third one was
Finland.
Iceland?
Oh, Iceland. Yes.
Finland never won.
Finland never won, no. Yeah. They just participated and got silver.
Yeah, so why do you say for now? Do you think we're sliding away from our position of football dominance in the region?
I don't really have an opinion, but it can change, and like you said, the last few tournaments have not been in the favor of Latvia, although the strong point for Latvia in the Baltic Cup is that in Latvia it is usually considered to be a more important event than for Lithuanians and Estonians, because I know that Lithuanians quite often don't come with a very good squad for the Baltic Cup, while for Latvia always the best available players play.
This summer they had a good following. There was a bit of a fan march, and they had some good international players, or players playing for international clubs turning up.
Yeah, this year I heard that Lithuanians wanted to win, and that there was a bonus planned for the team to win the tournament.
Have there been many bonuses in the past, or was
I don't know. In the pre-war years, nobody knows anything because everything was officially amateur sports.
Yeah.
But what it was in reality, too many years have passed, and nobody researched it. When there were people around whom you could ask.
Yeah.
And now, sadly, even if the state archives were to contain some info from the government agencies on paid taxes, those would probably not include footballers paid illegally.
So we need to do a bit of an appeal for anyone with information on the Baltic Cup. Contact you, I guess.
Yeah, I think that the ship has sailed a long time ago, along with many of our compatriots, sadly. But all right, so, well, how valuable would you say is the Baltic Cup even? Should we care about it? Or is it a relic of the past?
I would like to say that we should care about it because it is one of the very few things in Latvian sports that has some connection to further past, because we don't have any historical clubs. The tradition is very limited around here, so the Baltic Cup is at least one thing that you can sort of hold on to, saying that this is the thing that we have from the original Republic of Latvia.
Yeah, but what does that mean? So what do we do with it? How can we use this heritage to help our football?
I think it's a positive thing for Latvian and Baltic football. It shows, I mean, you could see in the last tournament that the more successful international teams had a lot more players playing outside the Baltic region. I think there's some good ways of measuring areas of success on how each country is doing. I think there's a romantic element to it as well. There's a great history.
Well, you don't need to convince me. I'm all for Baltic Cup, but playing the devil's advocate, looking from the outside, it's a small competition between three, in the grand scheme of things, insignificant football nations.
That's what makes it so perfect. Mid-season tournament where there's not too many games, but it allows the international teams to try and go up a level and be a bit more competitive. I think it can only be positive.
Yeah. Raymond, you don't seem to be too keen on these invited nations.
No, I don't really have anything against it, although it does defeat the term of it being the Baltic Cup when you have teams which are not from the Baltics.
Or at least the Baltic Sea area,
but at the same time, I am aware why the fourth team is invited to the tournament. Because we need to play more games.
Well, why can't we just have a league? Like the UEFA is now making everything a league.
I think a league would work well.
Have three teams, they play each other home and away, and then whoever finishes with most points and goal difference.
The format of a tournament has been changed so many times that if they want to turn it into a league, that's perfectly doable.
Yeah.
What's been the most successful format for the league, for the tournament?
Overall, the round-robin version where everyone plays against everyone does make sense. Although nowadays you cannot fit that in as short of a period of time as originally, because in the first tournament, the first conflict between Latvia and Estonia was for the reason that Latvia did not want to play two games over 2 days. Because at that time it was quite normal in football. You play today, you play tomorrow again. Yeah. And Latvia wanted to have one day as a break. And at that time you were considered not a manly man if you cannot play football 2 days in a row.
I like that. Why don't we have that anymore?
It sounds more like ice hockey.
And sometimes...
Who do play back-to-back?
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah, who do, exactly. I'm not sure that's so fun.
But theoretically, sometimes they even play 2 games in 1 day.
There you go.
Yeah,
football.
that would be good. What about the youth tournaments involved as well? Because you had the under-21s and so on this year. Has that been? How old is that? Youth teams playing.
There were some youth tournaments between the 3 Soviet countries in the pre-war times. The Baltic countries did not have the international youth teams. They sort of had, but the Latvian youth team played 3 games overall over the period from 1936 to 39. So not even 1 game a year.
Do you have a favorite year of the Baltic Cup?
There were some interesting tournaments in the pre-war times, but I don't remember the years. But I know that in one of the tournaments, which was the most popular amongst Latvians, the most popular Latvian footballer at the time, Albert Šēbelis, scored the tournament deciding goal in the last minute. So it was considered the best Baltic Cup for the Latvians.
That sounds wonderful.
Have there been any that have been more commercially successful, where federations might have invested more money in it and there was more popularity as a result? In
modern Latvian football, commercially successful, no. That does not ring a bell.
I suppose this year's example of Lithuanians finally wanting to win a game is something like that, and putting money behind the idea.
Overall, at least, I don't know about Lithuania and Estonia, but the Latvian Football Federation can always do a much better job than it does.
Right. Well, they have another 4 years to prove it now that we've just had elections. I mean, this is super interesting. Do you think Baltic Cup is here to stay, or do you think it's going to get squeezed out eventually by the international calendar?
Well, I believe it will stay for some time, for longer periods of time. It is impossible to predict if we reach a stage where in the European Championships you will have more teams participating than there are actually in Europe. Well, nobody knows, because we are heading for that direction in all the competitions.
Yeah, the schedules are getting busier and busier. But are you? I'm not sure if you're a fan of the Baltic Cup or not.
Well,
are you for or against it?
I'm a fan of our national team, and Baltic Cup is one of the competitions. I think the history is fantastic, and I love the cup and what it stands for. But it's too brief to be a fan of. It's like 2 games, and if you blink, you miss them, and that's that. But I do hope it doesn't go away. And thank you, Raimonds, for sharing your expertise with us, and it's been super interesting.
Okay.